The US and China have been negotiating a number of trade disputes for months. Many, including US Trade Secretary Stephen Mnuchin, thought a deal was imminent. But now, Washington's accusing Beijing of backtracking on reforms already agreed upon and says there's a price to pay.
By the way, you see the tariffs we're doing? Because they broke the deal. They broke the deal. So they're flying in. The vice premier tomorrow is flying in. Good man. But they broke the deal. They can't do that. So they'll be paying if we don't make the deal. Nothing wrong with taking in over $100 billion a year. 100 billion. We never did that before. And we have that happening, a lot of good things happening with a lot of countries.
At midnight on Thursday, US tariffs on some Chinese goods rise from 10% to 25%. The measures affect furniture, consumer electronics, building materials, and chemicals worth about $200 billion. Beijing denies reneging on its commitments and says it will respond with similar curbs on US goods.
The US has assigned a lot of labels, like backtracking, going back on one's word and so on. Lots of promises have been foisted on China. The Chinese side has valued credibility and has kept its promises. This has never changed.
As the two governments trade bobs, investors are pulling back.
For the last number of months, we've heard, by and large, positive news being drip-fed from both China and the US. And then with the events of the last few days, really highlighted that the US and China are probably not going to be striking a deal anytime soon.
The Shanghai Composite Index has fallen 7.5% this week. In the US, the Dow and the S&P 500 are both down 2%. Declines that could widen if the trade war escalates. And given the harsh rhetoric from both sides, some analysts fear the worst is yet to come. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
Let's get more on this now with TRT World's editor-at-large, Craig Copetas, who joins us now from Paris. Hi, Craig. The clock is ticking. Do you think Chinese negotiators will be able to talk the Trump administration out of imposing these new tariffs before midnight Friday?
Well, you know, Oscar, diplomacy in these trade negotiations is the art of saying nice doggy until you can find a rock. And both sides have been throwing them, and they're going to be throwing more by the end of this week. It is now harder today than it was yesterday to get a deal. Eventually, there will be a deal, but there's no way for the deal to be smoothly choreographed. There's too many issues. Look, we talk about diplomacy, trade, or any type of diplomacy is a matter of words. We're talking about trade negotiations that would lead to an agreement. Now, that sounds great, but what the United States is saying on top of that the agreements need to be backed up by changes in law in China, and the Chinese won't do that. They haven't done it since they joined the World Trade Organization some 30 years ago. And that's just one of the myriad of issues here that are scuppering any type of solution.
Yes. Now, Donald Trump, as we heard in that story, accused China of reneging on commitments. So do you think Beijing originally did agree to change their law in some respects, or was that just a myth?
They may have said that they would do it. They certainly have suggested in the past, but they've never done it. I've been speaking to a number of diplomats here today on this issue, and the widespread belief among the diplomatic corps is that the United States government is not functioning. There are too many balls in the air, and all of them are being juggled by what many diplomats are saying privately are the most unsteady hands to ever be in the White House. Now, you have to understand here that this goes beyond the dollars and cents that Mobin laid out. Both sides are exacerbated by two completely different political systems. For example, the Chinese ask, why would Trump want the Federal Reserve to lower rates if the economy is, not becoming weak? The Chinese don't understand the political juice that Trump can get out of that. And as far as the goods, the trade, well, Americans will keep buying Chinese stuff. Stuff, by the way, is a technical term economists use for Chinese consumer goods.
Yes, and meantime, the latest figures show that America's trade deficit with China has shrunk to a near 3-year low as imports dropped and exports went up. Do you think this will only further embolden Donald Trump in his argument to attack China?
Well, I think it will. You know, Oscar, I mean, for all of our viewers, it's easy to become benumbed by the constant drumbeat of the trade war. But the most important issue here, I would say, is that this is no longer an economic question. What's being asked now by the intelligence agencies, by Western diplomats, is does trade with China enhance Western security? So the calculus of any deal is no longer just dollars and cents. It goes well beyond that.
Okay, Craig Copetas in